Let's move on ahead and we can see for our demo purposes, I have created an empty JFrame. And in this JFrame, I'm going to be adding a table, a JTable. And to load the data with the JTable, I am going to put a button that will allow the user to click on. So the button I'm going to change to say it's going to be for the user to click on so they can load the data. And the name of the button, I'm going to make it btn load data or something. And from the palette, you're going to drag a table control that you see over here. You're going to drag it over onto your screen. You can adjust the size of the table as per your screen. Now, you can see by default, this table has got four columns named title 1 to 4. You may edit the titles based on the data you are going to be presenting and how you edit. For me, the data is going to come from this table in the database. So you can see there are five columns from student ID to note details. These are the data that I'm going to present in record format on my JTable. So let's go ahead and edit the model for this table to represent the data. So right click, go to the properties window, or the properties window might even appear on the right hand side at the bottom. You can see a property called model. You will go to the three dots next to it, and here you will see the table settings and the default values we have. So for the table settings, let's change the columns, and we might want to add another column by insert. If you want to delete columns, you can click on delete. If you want to add, you can insert. So I have five columns, so I've created five columns titled. The first one was student ID, and then the second one is got the registration date. The next one was whether they were present, some change it like that. The next one was whether the note was given, so I'll change it like that. And then lastly, it was the details that were present in the note. I will leave the data type as object because I'll show you how that affects in the code. Whether you check or uncheck editable will allow the user to type into the data table that you have presented on the screen. My purposes is just to show the data. I'm not really interested in allowing the user to edit because I'm not doing anything with the edit. In another video later, I'll show you how to take the data that the user has edited and probably update into the database. So that's our values. We don't want any default values to be present in the thing. If you want some default values, you might want to type something like null, or let's say the student IDs are initially assigned as zeros. I'm not interested. I'll present this as an empty table. So let's say OK, and you will see that your table is now in that format. You might want to change the font that we have that we are describing in the displaying in the data table. Might want to change it to something. You might want to change the size of your font so it's a bit bigger. So feel free to do all that. Even for the model, if you want, you can reset back to the default. Okay, so we've got our data table designed, the J table designed. Now we'll go on to moving and adding the data from the Microsoft Access table into this data. For that, obviously, I'm following an object-oriented programming, and in that, I'm going to have to create a method in my array class. You might want to do this code in the button click event, like in the event handler of the load button. I don't mind either way. I'm going to show you the object-oriented programming way, where the method that extracts the data from the database is present in another class. So for that, I've created the register array class. The register array class, it's quite a long class because I've been working on this in all my previous videos. I've created an array of registers. And I've got a connection to the DB connector class that uses a you can access libraries to connect to the Microsoft Access database. So in this method, I'm simply going to use the DB connector object and populate the result set and return it. So let's create the method public. The method is going to give us a result set back. The result set and the name of the method is called get registers. The method doesn't take any parameters, so it's got empty parameter list. In here, I'm going to first put a try catch block, and if there are any errors, I will simply output the message to say error while reading registers. And then we have to create a result set object, result set, made a spelling mistake, result set object called rs, which is going to you hold the contents that is from running this query. So I'll use the run select query that we've created previously in the DB connector class. And the query that we want to run is basically a select star from the name of the table is TBL registration, from TBL registration. So that's my query that I'll be executing using this method in the DB connector class. It will give me a result set back, which I keep inside this rs object. It's asking me to cast it. I'm not sure why that is doing that. Because this is in the connector class. Let me just quickly have a look. In the DB connector class, the method that we have written, it does return a result set. Wonder why it is now asking me to cast it into a result. Oh, sorry. The result set is spelled wrong. That's why. Is that wrong? Yes, it's spelled wrong. That's the reason why it's doing that. I'm sorry, my mistake. So there's no need to cast. No need to cast because of my spelling mistake. It didn't know what class we are talking about. Okay, all sorted. Let's move on, right? So obviously the result of the query execution will be in this rs. Now before we return this, let's actually check something. So I'm going to put an if else loop here to do something. So if rs is not equal to null, only then will I return this rs object. Otherwise, I am going to say that I'm returning a null object so that we can do proper error handling over here. Then it's still not happy because we said that we will return a result set and we are not returning something inside here. So I'm just going to say return null over here also. If it didn't end up here, we don't want to return a result set object. We want to return a null object. So the method to get the registers has been created. Now we go back to our user interface, and we want to say that when the user clicks on this button, we want to call the method we created in the other class. And for that, firstly, we have to create, firstly, we have to create an object of that class that we are going to call. So I'm going to say, oh, it's called register array class. I'm going to call it array equal to new register array. So I'll instantiate an object of that class, and using that object I will call the get result registers method. And as you remember, the registers method returns a result set object which we need to uh, receive. So result is set, I'm going to call this object result is equal to whatever is returned from the get registered method. Now I have to say if this result is not equal to null, then we proceed with populating our Jtable. Otherwise, as in if the result that we obtained was null, then we want to probably show a message to the user. So I'm going to use the show message dialog to say no data in extracted or something like that. Or you can say uh, registers not loaded or something like that. Okay, so if the result is not null, then we want to now read the data that is present in the result set. For that, I'm going to create a bunch of variables to read the data, and the variables are all going to be string in my case, and I'm going to read all this data that is coming from each and every record. So I'm going to call my variables the same as the heading names, roughly. So I'm going to call it student ID, and I'm going to call it registration date, present. Note that these variables are also strings, and the details that are present in the note. Now we loop through the result set using the rs.next is methods. Oh, sorry, it's not called rs, it's called results. While the we loop through each and every okay, so while we loop through this, we want to probably do a try catch block, otherwise it's not happy. So I'm going to wrap this or put this while loop inside my try catch block, and if there is an error while this happening, I'm going to display some or other error. Okay, so hope you can see the logic coming along. So while we loop through each and every record in the result set, we want to read each and every item inside the fields in the each and every column. So first what we want to get is the student ID into the string variable that we have created here. So we will just say result dot get string, because I'm reading each of them as a string, and the name of the heading of the field that we are going to read or column is called student ID. So don't make a mistake while that happens. I would prefer if you go to the design view of the table and copy the headings and paste it over here so we don't make a mistake. Okay, there's an error over here. Then the next one that we want to read is registration date. I'm going to copy the same, basically the same line of code four more times, one, two, three, and four, and just change the values that we are going to read to make life a bit easier, and details will come over here, and then we will go and change. All of these are going to be read as strings, so I'm not going to worry about changing the get string method, but you can see that this is going to be registration date, and this is going to be present. This is the column called note present, and this is the column called note details. So I've read in the values in one row. Now using those values, I am going to actually create a string array like so. It's called array of result equal to, and the value that we are going to put into the string array is basically these variables. So student ID, reg date, present, note, and the details. So these variables will be now used to create an array object. Now, what we want to do is we want to get the model, the data table model uh, of the array. So for that, for the Jtable, so for that, I am going to use the class called definition table model, or table model. No, what is this called? default table model. I'm sorry for the delay while I was thinking about what the class name was. It's the default table model class that we are going to use to read the data table model, the model of the current JTable. So we create an object of this class called model is equal to, we are going to get the model that is for this table. So for that, we have to actually access this data table. The name of the data table I didn't change, so it's still called JTable1. If you want to, you can change it to DT or whatever. So I'm not going to change it for now, so I can access it over here. So it's JTable1 is the name of the table, and I'm going to use the get model method, which gives us a table model, right? The default table model. But now you will see that there is an error because the table model object. So this method is actually, you will see the method is, sorry, okay, the method returns a table model object, which we are trying to put into a default table model object. So for that, we simply have to cast it into an object of this class. So we do the casting like this. So all the problems are sorted. Now you use this model to add a row using this array. So how do we do this? We say add row, and we want to add the row that is basically this string array, and this process will happen. So we don't want to get the model each time. We would prefer if this model is obtained once, which is outside this while loop, we read the result set one by one using this while loop. We create the string array using the values obtained, and the string array is now added as a row into our tables model. So I hope that is clear, and let's see how this works in real life. So hoping everything will work properly. So the screen is loaded with the column headings that we said we want. We click on the button, and as you can see, it loads the data into our table. Okay, so a couple of things wrong here. You can see the table by default has 4 rows, which we should have removed before we added in here. Okay, so those are design changes that we can make, but the data that we are basically reading from the text the database is being presented here, as you can see. I'm just going to go back into our design view, go to the properties of the table, and in the table model, we can just remove the, oops, sorry. Okay, oh, I should have changed the table settings called rows. You see here, we should have changed it to 0 over here instead of doing that. So the column number 1, again, I'm going to just insert the student ID that I accidentally deleted. Sorry about that. I'm going to leave this as editable for now so we can actually see that. Okay, so we've got 5 columns named this. One of them is editable. Initially there were 4 rows by default. We are going to change it to 0. So you will see with our table design now changes. I'm going to save my change, and let's go and run our project one more time. And you will see right now I got an empty table. If I load the data, there is no problem. See, all the data are there, and I can edit. So maybe I want to change it to something I can edit. So you can see, also note the problem with allowing users to edit. They expect something to happen. So if you're not going to do anything with this data that they have edited, do not allow them to edit. So hopefully that's clear. Thank you very much.